Hey everyone. So today we're going to do a little preliminary work on the Kubota L Series, and if you've watched before you're going to see some familiar things. We're doing the lift test, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've got planned for this tractor. Introduced it in a short back probably a couple months ago at this point, and I didn't give a lot of detail because honestly I just had it for a few days. I found a pretty good deal on it. Unfortunately, tractors seem, well, not unfortunately, maybe unfortunately for me, tractors seem to be coming down just a little bit, and I might have got a better deal if I waited, but I feel like that's always true. So I saw this one, it's in pretty good shape. It's exactly what I was looking for, so I went ahead and pulled the trigger on it. Now, I'm gonna focus a little bit on the product we already have on the shelf for this, which is the lift cylinders and curl cylinders for an LA 524, 525, or 526. And it also includes an LA 463, which you'll see those on some of the earlier, I'd say early to mid 2000s L Series, like an L2800, maybe an L3400, some of those. If you're familiar with Kubotas, you'll kind of know what I mean. Like at some point, I want to say it's probably around 2010 or so, they kind of took on I'll call it this look. And this tractor to me is not a lot different than like a 2005 L2800. It does look different. The hood's a little prettier in my opinion, maybe the headlights and things like that, but engine's very similar. If you look at the front axle, a lot of this stuff is tried and true components from Kubota, and these have been really good tractors for a lot of years. So yeah, things get updated, and yeah, there's a few features, but this is a standard L. So that means, I think, there's just not a lot of bells and whistles, but it really has everything anybody needs on a tractor, in my opinion. I mean, you've got a loader, it does have some things that are a little bit, I would say, unusual for a modern tractor. So an example would be, it still has a clutch. So I have to think about this, but I think that means that the PTO isn't technically live like you think of on, back in the 50s, 60s or whatever. Live PTO was a big deal, right? So that you could actually have your PTO spinning, you could drive, and then you could stop, and it does not keep pushing the tractor. I feel like every old timer I talked about back then had a story about the tractor pushing them through a barbed wire fence. And I've got my own story as well, just because you kind of forget about it. And depending on what you're pulling, if you're pulling a bush hog or something like that, and you forget that you're gonna need a little extra time to stop because the PTO is gonna push you. If you try to stop immediately, if you don't cut it off, then you get your story. So that said, let me just kind of come back here. We've got approved ballast weight here. I didn't want to go put an implement on. I've got a little bit of dirt on the tires, but it just rained here, and the implements that I might do the job were out in the mud, and I didn't want to go get them. So we just kind of chained ourselves up here to the forklift. That should be sufficient. Let's see. Got everything set up here. Zero, this is tare to zero, and it also is set to capture the peak weight, right? So I'm gonna do 2 pulls, and typical, I'll start at idle, and we'll do one at wide open throttle. Now, on this tractor, wide open throttle is on the lower range of, I don't know if I could say it's on the lower range. It's lower than the John Deere's, like John Deere 25, 26, even 2,700 RPMs. This tractor, I think, is like 2,200 RPMs, which is more typical, I think, for a diesel. But I don't know that it matters that much. I do like that it kind of makes its peak power at the lower RPM, because I'm somebody who likes lower RPMs and less noise, but ultimately, it may not be that big a deal. But I tell you the difference in RPM is because with hydraulics, as you go up in RPMs, you will go up in pressure. And the reason you go up in pressure is because as you add more flow, so this at idle might be, say, 3 gallons a minute, and at wide open throttle, it's 5. And I made those numbers up. I don't know exactly, or I don't remember exactly what this tractor has. But as you do that, your pressure relief valve is a mechanical piece, right? And you have it set to something. And so only so much fluid can go past that pressure relief valve when you hit it. So if you add more fluid, then less can go by, and you're going to build a little bit of residual pressure as you increase the hydraulic flow. So the fact that we're only increasing it a few gallons per minute means it'll go up a little bit. But if we were going from a low RPM to a high RPM, and we were going from, say, 3 to 15, we would see the pressure change more significantly because it can only go past the pressure relief valve so fast. So that said, I already did the pressure test. I won't show you that. Just trust me on it. But at idle, I don't remember what the idle RPM is. We can look at it in just a second. We were right at 2200 PSI, which the specification for the L Series is 2205. That's probably some bar translation, but 2205. And then if you go wide open throttle on this tractor, you'll get up to about 20, it's a little over 23, maybe 2350. So that will increase your lift capacity as you increase your RPMs. So we'll see what both of those do. I'll just mention it. Last thing we'll do is we're going to do a lift height, what it is before with stock cylinders here, and then we'll do after. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's go ahead and get started on the how much it can lift. Now, one thing I just discovered, you may not know this, everybody who has one probably knows it, I didn't know it. That's a clutch, right? And this is a hydrostatic, so you really don't need a clutch, but it works with the PTO. But you do have to push the clutch to start it. And I was constantly walking around the tractor because I can't reach the clutch from over here, but there is a little handy catch down there if you can see it. And that lets me actually start it without having to get on the tractor. All right. Idling at about, looks like 900, no, 1100. So I'd already warmed the tractor up, so it doesn't have a cold start device that I know of, but the hydraulic fluid's already warm. So I mentioned cold start device. If it has a cold start device, it might elevate the RPMs for a bit, but even if it has a cold start device, it's definitely warm enough to pull back down from that. So yeah, it looks like 1100 RPMs. We're gonna gently go up here. I don't want any, our back tires, while we do have our ballast back here, it's not perfect. And so pulling the back end up a little bit, I don't want to jar it because I don't want to get any false readings. All right, we got a hefty pull there. 1494, almost 1,500 pounds. Let's go ahead and go up to wide open throttle. Get up there. The RPM gauge a little slow. All right, now we can let it down here because it should have captured the peak. Let's see what we got. 1572, so almost 100 pounds more, 80 pounds more after adding that, 100 and almost 150 PSI. So, and the test, I won't go through it in too much detail, but as you can see, we're right at about 24 inches off the ground for the pin here. We're a little more than that. Actually, do I have a tape? Yes, I have a tape. Let's look at exactly where we're kind of grabbing our measurement here. So 24 here, and I would say this is more 18. Yeah, almost 18. Can you see that? Yeah, 18 on the pin. And I'm pointing those out because that's where in the literature you're going to see that's where you're going to see the actual measurements being taken. They'll say this much weight at the pin. Let me get my tape measure again here. And then if we say how far in front of the pin we are, we're just right at I would say 20 inches in front of the pin. And that actually is pretty consistent with how they report the numbers, meaning they'll give you a number at the pin and they'll give you a number, I think it's 20 inches, maybe it's 20 millimeters, I don't remember. So all that to say, if you're wondering, maybe you haven't watched my videos before, and if you're thinking, well, his scientific method is a little bit all over the place, I don't really care as much about, are we 20 inches in front of the pin? Are we at the pin? What I care about, because of the products that I make, is what does this do against the HydrosPlus Lift Plus in the same scenario? So as long as it's the same, we could do it way up here, we could do it all the way at the bottom, doesn't matter to me. I am looking for percentages, and we can calculate those percentages and actually get very close to them with a test like this, because we can just do the math. Hydraulics are very consistent in the math, but just in case something is, a little bit off, and of course, the inside bore of this cylinder, if I'm calling it a 2-inch bore, which is 50.8 millimeters, but it's actually a 50 millimeter bore, I know 0.8 millimeters is not a lot, there can be some variation in that. And we always hope that it's 51 instead of 50.8, and then we get just a little bit more. But depending on just the measurements and exactly how it goes, it could be, mileage may vary, we'll say it that way. So let's talk a little bit more about this tractor, what we plan to do with it, and then I'm going to get into changing these cylinders over. Now I'm not going to do it as a full install video. What I'm actually going to do is just give you a few of the tricks that I use, which are things that you probably have already thought of, but I do have customers for kind of all walks of life, all different experience levels, and they may have not changed anything like this before, but they want to try to change it. I realize they have a tractor, so we're all tractor owners. We know some mechanical things, but if you don't have experience with something, it's always a little more comfortable if you just see somebody else do it. So anyway, I'll do that, but these are probably, of all of the parts I have on the shelf regarding hydraulic cylinders, these may be the very easiest to change. Everything is very accessible, and it's just pretty straightforward. So let's talk a little bit more about what this tractor is going to end up with from HydrosPlus. Now, I'm not going to make any promises on timelines, so if you're watching this, and if you're watching this is in November of 2024, if you're watching this way in the future, hopefully you can just go to hydrosplus.com and you're going to see a lot of these products already on the shelf. But I've already got a good backlog of things that I had thought would already be out, and they're not out at this point, so I am going to have to hold up on my predictions of when certain things are going to be here. But here's, let's talk a little bit about what I think is coming, and in future videos I'll talk about when do I think these are coming. All right, so let me, actually, I'm going to say it here just because I want to let this down. When you do this install, oh, you know what, before I do that, I'm going to talk about this, but we're also going to get a height measurement before, and because of that, I'm going to kind of leave the loader where it is. But let's talk about the hydraulic pump, which is right here. And so I've already been working with an engineering team on, so I've modeled this in CAD, and we're looking at making this pump bigger. And what I don't know, and I've got to do more, before I'm comfortable putting anything on the shelf, I've got to do more experimentation, and I don't have a pump to do more experimentation on just yet. Here's the challenge. You can see that this is the steering shaft, right? Comes up from the steering wheel here, goes down, and something that's really interesting about this tractor, let's see if we can see it here, is it has what I would call a truck style steering box, right? So most of the tractors, including the BX out there, the 1 Series, most of the John Deeres, they use an orbital control valve or a Charlene valve to move a hydraulic cylinder to do your actual steering. This is actually like a truck. It's hydraulic steering, but it uses, think of your pickup that has the Saginaw pump on it, and it is I can't remember what it's not a rack and pinion, but it's the one that has a pitman arm, and that's what we have here. Now, I tell you that mainly just because it called out that the steering is here. The good thing about that though is like on the Kubota out there, you can infinitely turn your steering wheel, but on this one, it's like your pickup, right? And this doesn't lock, of course, if your pickup locks, but I don't think they do that anymore. But the beauty of this is very good, in my opinion, is when you put your ball, and this one's on the wrong side, but it's how it was when I got it, you can put your steering knob exactly where you want it, like if you were driving an 18-wheeler, and it will always come back to that position. On those tractors, it's gonna go all over the place. It's still worth having a steering knob, in my opinion, but it's gonna be all over the place. This one will consistently, when you're steering straight, assuming you didn't run into anything and bend a tie rod, it's gonna come back to the same location, which I really like that. So I know it's a tangent to got off on, but I think that that's an interesting, I've not seen a tractor with that, but I'm also not somebody that's seen lots and lots of tractors. Maybe they use this in ag a lot, but there's this steering rod here, and it goes so close to this pump. So this here is the power steering portion of the pump, the smaller portion, and this is the implement portion of the pump. But as you can see, I can't really make the pump bigger in really any direction. I can't go that way because we're going to run into, that thing is in the way, we're going to run into this shaft, and I can't get fatter because we're going to run into the shaft. So what does that mean? In order to get a pump, a more significant pump, I've got to do something different with this steering shaft, and I honestly am not sure I'm up for redirecting that in such a significant way that I can make that bigger. Maybe. That's what I'm looking at, but as you can see, what we'd have to do is we'd have to replace this shaft. This one maybe can stay because it just needs to come out, but then we've got to get a new carrier here or relocate this carrier in such a way that we're moving everything out here a little bit more, and we got to do testing. So that's what's next for this tractor regarding the hydraulic pump if we're going to get more hydraulic flow. And it's not impossible that you could go with a completely different pump, but I really wanted to go with something that is pretty consistent with the stock pump. Again, it can be done in a few different ways, but I've already kind of ran into the wall on the first iteration, and the next iteration has me changing the steering shaft, which again, is probably doable. I just haven't jumped into it yet. So, hydraulics may end up staying around what it is today, so 5 gallons a minute. Maybe we can make another pump, but I have to ask myself the question, like if we're 5 gallons a minute today, and I can make a pump that's 6 gallons a minute and keep it in the same form factor, is that really going to be worth it, right? Yes, it will make things faster, but I'm just not sure about that being worth doing, and if people are going to be interested in it. I think it's worth it, I guess, but I got to have enough people that are interested or agree with me so that I can, get my money back at least. I would do it just to get my money back just because I want more flow, but it would be, I'd have to sell quite a few of them. So that's one question. The other one really is, where do we go on a tractor like this? 25 horsepower is what this tractor has, but this same form factor is going to go all the way up to around 40 horsepower. I don't know if it's 39 is the top, or maybe there's a 46 or something like that. I'll have to look. But at 40 horsepower with a tractor this size, we can legitimately run some skid steer, some smaller skid steer implements. And I don't have the skid steer quick attach, but a lot of people do. And so my thought is I want to go from 5 gallons a minute to 15 gallons a minute. well, as you can imagine, 15 gallons a minute, that's much larger exterior housing, and that's kind of why I am where I am. Like, do I want to keep everything the same and go up to 6, 7, 8 gallons a minute, which would be a pretty good improvement. It would, you know, you'd be able to run some smaller implements, maybe a log splitter effectively enough that you would keep one. But is it that, or is it we're going to wait or go more drastic and go 15 gallons a minute? We'll see. All right, so let me pop the hood here, and we're going to talk about what's on the inside. Okay, I popped the hood, but that, I don't know if I can see a whole lot more. So I'm outside here. 1.6 liter engine, that's the same size engine as you see in the John Deere large frame 2 and the 3 Series engine, 3-cylinder, or when I say 3 Series, yes, 3R, yeah, and 3E. So any of the 3 Series as well as the large frame 2R. So we've got a mechanically injected engine, which is something that we can work with. And we've got a little bit of room in here. Now they keep the fuel tank within the engine bay, which is not ideal, but it can be worked around. We also have, as you can see over there, the muffler, and we've got this clean air intake that comes all the way here to the front. So honestly, I think there's plenty of room in there to stuff a turbo, and that's exactly why I got the 2501 and not one of the larger machines. So turbo is likely for this, and probably the next product that will be out for this particular machine. So both the next product for that, and we'll talk about how long that has been and what the problems are here in the upcoming video, but the next product for this is likely to be the turbo. What can we get out of a 2501, 25 horsepower tractor, 1.6 liter? We'll see. I think we'll have to see what kind of plungers are in it, but this one is going to be easier than the 3025 because we don't have a electronically controlled governor in this case. So this is a more traditional mechanical fuel pump, and we're going to do the basics of adding the turbo. We will probably, from what I can see in here, you can see there, we'll be able to build a casting that's not too fancy and end up with, let's see better if I go over here, maybe. Yeah, you can see. They've left us a pedestal here, which is always good, rather than having on the BX, it went out to the front, and that's why we ended up with a new manifold. And again, I won't get into the BX, but I think to do it shortly, I think I should have made a manifold that had a pedestal and then had a separate casting for holding the turbo, but we are where we are. Anyway, lots of room in there to work with. This is probably the next product coming from HydrosPlus, and then after that, it's going to be kind of a race whether it's going to be some type of third function valve that works with this tractor or the hydraulic pump. And that's probably the majority of what we're looking at for this particular platform. There'll be potentially some additional hydraulic functions, but they're not going to be anything significant. So example would be not only a front third function, but some that will come to the back here. And if not some dedicated from the back, we'll definitely have what I currently call a third function plus, where it takes the front one when not in use and you're able to use it to the back. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for this platform. I'm going to go ahead and raise this up, get this measurement on how high this bucket can lift, and then we'll jump into kind of the tips and tricks of changing these cylinders out. Okay, as it turns out, I don't have enough hands to do a good measurement up here and be able to hold the camera. So I'm just going to tell you. So the way I do this is I measure here and here, until it's level, or until I get the same measurement. And that was 86 3/4 based on, you know, where we are here. There can be some slight variation. If you get a different number, that's probably why, but it shouldn't be much different than that. The other measurement that, well, I think the measurement they actually give you is at the pin, because this represents where you can kind of break over into the side of something, like if you were loading into a dump truck, and that is 92.5, maybe 92 3/4 is the number I'm getting there. And we'll see what this is after. And I tell you this, you know, you might think to yourself, well, why wouldn't you already know kind of what that number is? And the L Series cylinders are different than any other product. This is the very first product that I made or designed based on or for a tractor that I did not own. So generally speaking, I'm not gonna build things for a tractor I don't own. Let's see if I can not hit that. Okay, there we go. But there are exceptions, and the reason I don't build things for tractors that I don't have is because if something does come up after the fact, and sometimes it can, I don't have easy access to go and do any kind of testing. So you could certainly go to the Kubota dealership and probably take measurements, especially if you know a guy. All you need to do is take some measurements. They wouldn't be exactly right, but they would be pretty close enough to probably get something on the shelf. But I don't think that's good enough, and for a couple of reasons. One, since I'm kind of a one-man show, I can't put something on the shelf that needs a lot of support. Just not enough of me to go around. So I have to be pretty confident in every aspect of it before I put it on the shelf. So I won't go into that too far. That's really what makes these a little bit unusual, and why I haven't necessarily reported out you know, the specifics of this increases your lift height by this much, or it doesn't increase the lift height, or you know, whatever it is. What I do guarantee is that when you get my cylinders, whether they're this L Series, the Kubota BX, at a minimum, they go at least as low as you can go previously with your stock cylinders, and at least as high as you can go with your stock cylinders. You do not lose any range of motion, and if you were to lose range of motion, I'd be very clear about that as almost like a warning. But honestly, if it's something that's going to lose range of motion, there's a good chance I'm not going to do it, because I don't like the trade-offs of that. Even though it could be reasonable at this point, I'm not going to do it. And the 3 Series has given me a little bit of a fit in that realm, and that's another video. But I think it's important that we can, you know, kind of do the same thing with the tractor, just in a stronger way. So that said, I had made these based on a tractor that was borrowed, and I don't have access to that tractor anymore, so now I actually do have the tractor, and so I feel good about actually having this on the shelf, and that's why I'm showing you kind of the final details. And once we see what the lift increase is or isn't, when I designed them, I did design a little bit of increase in, but not like with the Kubota BX, and there was more room to go. We could go way up, but honestly, I have not heard any complaints in anything that I've read that this tractor really doesn't lift high enough. Of course, I think everybody would like to lift a little bit higher, or at least have that in their back pocket. But you know, all the way up there at 80-something inches for a tractor this size is pretty good, or 92.5. So you're almost 100 inches at the pin. That's pretty good, and I don't think there's too many complaining about it. But I think based on the measurements, we should be able to get a little more than that out of the HydrosPlus cylinders. So before I get started, and like I said, this is going to be kind of an abbreviated installation video, in that what I'm going to do is just kind of give you the tips and tricks. It's so dead simple that I think that's all that's really required. Now, a few call outs. One, this cylinder and that cylinder for this tractor, they're the same. That's beautiful, because now I can stock one type of cylinder and they go on both sides. So when you do order these, if you go out to the website, basically you're buying one set, or if you choose to add, you can add the second set. You do get a discount if you buy them at the same time. If you were to buy them the first time, not add the second set on, and then come back and buy them because you wanted the second set, then you'll pay a little bit more. So I do encourage you to get all 4, because honestly, you're probably going to get all 4 anyway. But the main reason to get all 4 is once you get more power here, you will be able to lift more than you can curl. And you may still get in situations with forks and other things that you can lift more than you can curl, but generally having these somewhat balanced is a good idea, and Kubota has done the same thing. They basically consider this balanced. So that's my recommendation, but it's up to you to make the choice. All right, first tip on this, when you put your bucket down, and you can do this off the tractor or on the tractor. I recommend just doing it on the tractor, and the reason being is you have your hydraulics quickly available in case you do need to use them to extend or retract the cylinder if you get in a bit of a bind that you can't move it. And it's just simple enough. You don't have to go through the whole process of taking your loader off. But if your loader's already off and you want to add them or something like that, you can do it. It's not a big deal. First tip, put your bucket down and tilt it forward so that you get some height on the boom arms here. And the reason for that is we're going to have some gap here that once we take everything loose, I can pull this back and get it out of here without having to, if it's all the way down, especially if you're on uneven terrain, it's possible that you can loosen everything and you won't be able to get it out of there because you can't retract it anymore because it's already fully retracted. Same thing for putting them in. If it's already, to the point where it's completely retracted, then getting it in and getting everything lined up is a bit of a challenge. So you don't have to tilt it this far forward, but tilt it forward some, put your bucket on the ground, and then obviously relieve all of your pressure. I went ahead, since we're doing the lift, I went ahead and just put it into the float position. And from there, all I'm gonna do, and I'm not gonna do this on camera to waste the time, but I'm gonna take this bolt loose. There's a bolt back here, very similarly. Take it loose. I'm gonna knock these pins out, and I'm also gonna take off the hose here and here. Yeah, here. Now, notice while we're looking at it, these are pipe thread, and on the new ones, or the HydrosPlus Lift Plus, we use O-ring Boss as our fittings. Now, this end of the fitting is the same, so you don't need any different hoses, but we use O-ring Boss because they're more reliable. Yes, O-rings can leak on occasion, but you just slap a new O-ring in and you're good to go. When these leak, it's a whole pain. You got to take them off. More thread locker, or not thread locker, don't use that, but thread sealant. You got to tighten them up, and if they don't align just right, if you've dealt with the pipe threads in the past, I doubt that you love them more than you like the O-ring version. So same here. We're going to take this bolt out, knock the pins out, take the hoses loose, and then we'll just put the new cylinder in. All right, we've got all 4 cylinders on, and let me give you a few more tips and tricks. Like I said, not doing this as an install video because it's so dead simple, but a couple of other tricks I would say. One is make sure when you put this on that your grease zerk is oriented. I need to tighten that one back on. Is oriented outward, so it's easy to grease. And same thing goes for the one down here. It's a straight one, these are the same cylinders, so that one, it'll look like that, but it's gonna be pointing down. Make sure it's not pointing up. You're gonna have a hard time getting to it if it's pointing up. Now, on your cylinders, you may have a straight or a bent one, but because I'm making all these the same, you're gonna have a bent one up here. It's the same, and it's not gonna get in the way, so just make sure that's not pointed that way. Of course, you could change that one after the fact, and same thing goes for the one in there. Other than that, well, maybe one question I know I'm gonna get, these are O-ring Boss, as I mentioned. They'll come in the box, and you'll take out some plugs and then put the fittings in. You're gonna have this jam nut here, so you basically tighten it in, 2 or 3 turns, and then orient it the way you want, and then you'll use the jam nut to hold it in place. If you have to end up getting different fittings. And the reason I say that is some of these tractors, especially the older ones, may have already had even a cylinder replaced or a hydraulic line replaced, and it may have different ends. This fitting that goes into the cylinder is what's referred to as a -6 O-ring boss or a 3/8 O-ring boss that goes into the cylinder. And then whatever you have on this side, the factory provided hoses should be a 1/2 inch or a -8 JIC. That's a 37-degree flare. Some people call those, or they're also called an AN fitting, so it would be an AN 8 fitting, because we won't go into the dash sizes, but it could be an AN 8, so AN is Army Navy for military spec, and then 8 is for 1/2 inch. If you want to know the torque spec on these, it's 20 foot-pounds, 16 to 20 foot-pounds, but really don't worry about getting a torque wrench out on this. You really can't over-tighten. I mean, you can over-tighten them, but like if you just make sure they're good and tight, what it's doing is pushing that O-ring into this boss here. And as long as it's lined up correctly, you can't really over-tighten it such that the O-ring is going to leak. You may break something else, but you'll know when to stop, I feel confident. Other than that, that's really all the tips and tricks because it is simple. Maybe the last thing I'll mention, let's see here, on this tractor, you've got a hydraulic sight glass. This is the hydrostatic version, and I think the gear version is either right here or it's on the other side in that area. So you probably already know where your sight glass is. You are going to lose some fluid. Now let's talk about it in a couple of different contexts. You're going to lose a little fluid on the ground as you take these hydraulic lines off, but where you're really going to lose the fluid is all the fluid that is already inside of here. It's roughly 1 quart per cylinder, and these cylinders just, there's a piston in here that moves back and forth, and depending on its disposition, you're going to have a little more or a little less. So depending on that, it may be less than a quart or maybe slightly more than a quart. Actually, I think a quart is about the maximum it would have if it had nothing inside of it. So you figure you're going to lose a gallon. This tractor has about 6 gallons of capacity, maybe 6.2, I think is what the capacity is. You may not even notice that on the sight glass. You'll probably be fine not even adding. These tractors have a reservoir, because if you were to hook this up to a hydraulic implement or anything like that, you're going to use some of that fluid and you'll be just fine in most cases. But of course, I know you guys are going to be checking your sight glass and adding fluid. But just to give you a general idea, you're going to lose roughly a gallon, assuming you don't have some way to recover that. I can't think of one without just putting it in a pan and straining it. But don't do that. It's expensive, but not that expensive. So let me go ahead. I'm going to start this thing up, and I'm going to go all the way to the top, and I'll get a measurement first, and then we'll go and do our lift capacity test. Oh, one more thing I'll mention. Once you actually start the tractor and for the very first time, go ahead and run. I was in float here. You'll notice there's no movement even though I'm moving this. And see how floppy the bucket is? It's because there's air. Our only fluid is air at this point, no hydraulic fluid. So go ahead and run your hydraulics to their extents, back and forth like this, and then all the way up. And that'll make sure that you don't have any air in the line. See how slow they're moving right now? But they'll start, as they fill up, they'll start reacting as you would expect them to. They are, of course, a little bit slower than your stock cylinders, but that's the trade-off for the larger or the higher lift capacity. So I'm going to go ahead and run this up and down a few times, and then we'll do this measurement. All right, it is official. It looks like we're going to get about 7 inches of additional lift height with the HydrosPlus Lift Plus versus stock, which is about, I went back and looked at my notes, and that's kind of close to what I calculated. I actually calculated, I think, 3 to 4. But as I mentioned earlier in this video, I did not own the tractor at the time, and I really wasn't terribly comfortable going, the maximum of what it could do. I did have also some concerns that things could interfere, and so I was trying to get to market a little faster, which is what I typically do, and so I kind of was conservative on getting that additional lift height. Now, that said, this is not, again, a tractor like the BX that you can see out past this one. Hang on. In that the BX felt like they were intentionally putting it, honestly, just too low. It was, it was like 66 inches, I think, where the John Deere 1 Series, which is, the best comparison as far as the John Deere brand, and it was at 70 something. So taking that tractor from 66 up to 74 or whatever it is, I don't remember off the top of my head, was less of a stretch than taking a tractor like this that nobody's really complaining about the lift height on it. And, if we went up another 12 inches, we would be at like 105. I think the pin on this one went from about 92 to 99. And the bucket edge, I think it was 86 to like 93. I didn't get super accurate in those measurements. And your mileage could vary to some degree. So that said, I think that's a good result. And I will start adding that to the marketing so that people understand exactly what you're getting. As people would ask me that in the past, I would say, look, don't buy these for additional lift height. I do know that we have some additional lift height, hadn't measured it, but it will be. The other thing is this is going to go down just as far as your stock cylinder. So the retracted length on these are exactly the same as the stock. The extended length on them is about 1.25 inches, I think, longer. And that's where we get our additional 7 inches of lift. All right, we got everything zeroed out and we're ready to do our first pull at idle. Let's see. 1100 RPMs, and we'll go up here nice and easy. $20.78 at our 150 or so PSI. Make sure we get a good pull there. So it's 20.78, now we got 21.78, so 100 more pounds. I think the last one, let's do our math in real time. I could just put it on the screen, but look, I'm not filming on my phone right now, but I used to do that a lot, and I still do that. And but I'd never had a calculator, so I got one fancy like this. So 1492, nope, 96, I think, minus 78. Can't really do this behind the camera very well. 582. All right, so 582 by 1496. almost 39% increase. Now by the math, we should have gotten 35 to 36. So I think I may have mentioned this earlier, we'll see if it makes the cut. There are some nuances that can change what you actually get, and I think the numbers also that I put are a little conservative, not much, they're pretty close to the math. I think the actual number is like 36 and some change, so I say 36 or even 35 in some cases to make sure that I don't over-promise something. So 1572 minus, should do this the other way, right? 2178, 606. 606 divided by 1572. So we're using the denominator is actually, the before, right? And so 38, 0.5. And that varied even just a little bit. Now, of course, this isn't the absolute highest quality crane scale money can buy there's some variation potentially there. We're using, you know, the technology used here is very often used, but there is some margin of error in crane scales even. So, you know, maybe we did get just over 36, let this guy down, 36% increase, but I think you'll be happy with that regardless, right? So we're going from 1.75 to 2.0. Now, if you've followed along on some of the John Deere stuff, you'll note that we get as much as 80, well, it's like 77% increase in lift capacity on one of those. That is because they started at 1.5. But it's more complicated than that, because not only you got a 1.75, but you got a complete different loader geometry. You've got, you know, 1.5 and it's closer to the tractor, et cetera. That's why you see some of those differences. But from the hydraulic cylinder point of view, it's very linear. If you go up 0.25 and your denominator in this case is 1.75, it's about, you know, 36%. And even if you go 0.25 of 1.5, it's still about that same percentage. But I am very happy with that result. Everybody who has bought the initial batch, which I didn't even market, and this is the first video I have on this tractor. Now, they have put videos out, some of the people that have purchased these cylinders that I had on my shelf, but I didn't really tell anybody about them. I may have said it in a newsletter, but it's been a long time since I've done a newsletter. That initial batch sold out. Now we do have these, and they're back in stock. And kind of the final answer, if you're looking for 6 to 7 inches of increased lift height, and about 30, we're still gonna say 36, even though the results there's 39. I wanna be conservative, but if you wanna lift, you know, that's a solid 500-pound increase in lift capacity, no additional pressure increase needed. Now, if you decide to do that, you know, that's up to you. Do as you please. I personally like to have as much lift capacity in my back pocket as I need. I don't need the tractor to tell me whether to lift it or not. I'll lift it. I'll decide if I want to lift it, and if and whether I think that's gonna, you know, pull the back end off the ground, whatever it may be, that's up to me. Generally speaking, I would say it moves the pressure relief valve from somewhere in here probably, or maybe down there, into whatever's sitting right here. When the back end comes off the ground, once you have, depending on the ballast you have, of course, we were never lifting this off the ground, but if we can lift 2,000 pounds up here, you're gonna need quite a substantial amount of ballast, and if your rear end starts coming off the ground, I think you'll back out of it. So that's my point of view. Not everybody's gonna agree with it, and that is totally fine, but I'm glad to bring this to market. We're excited about this product, as well as turbos and other hydraulic functions that are coming soon. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed, please consider it. And thanks for watching.